The order was given: prepare the lifeboats, wake the passengers. Titanic was still brightly lit. The ship was still standing, and many passengers could not believe they were in danger. Some thought the lifeboats were only being prepared as a precaution, but the crew knew the truth. Titanic was sinking. On the boat deck, sailors began uncovering the lifeboats. Passengers were told to put on life jackets. Women and children were generally given priority. But there was a problem. There were not enough lifeboat spaces for everyone aboard. At around 12:40 a.m., the first lifeboat was lowered into the freezing Atlantic. Lifeboat number 7 carried only a fraction of the people it could hold. Some passengers refused to leave. Why would they abandon the largest ship in the world for a small wooden boat floating in the darkness? Titanic still looked safe. Its lights still shone. Its massive decks still stood above the ocean. But beneath them, the water was rising. As the minutes passed, the situation became more serious. More passengers arrived on the boat deck. Crew members shouted instructions. Lifeboats were being uncovered and prepared. Families searched for one another. Some passengers were separated from loved ones in the confusion. The ship's officers tried to maintain order, but the reality was becoming impossible to ignore. Titanic was sinking, and there were hundreds of people still waiting for a place in a lifeboat. Yet even as fear spread across the ship, there were extraordinary acts of courage. Crew members continued helping passengers. Some stayed behind to keep the evacuation organized, and the ship's musicians continued playing on the boat deck. Their music could not stop the sinking, but it helped calm frightened passengers during the evacuation. Across Titanic, ordinary people faced an extraordinary disaster. Some helped strangers, some protected their families, and some remained at their posts even when they knew the danger was growing. The bow was sinking lower. The deck was beginning to tilt. More lifeboats disappeared into the darkness, but hundreds of people were still aboard. The night was growing colder. The ocean was growing closer, and Titanic's final moments were approaching. The ship that had been called unsinkable was now running out of time. The remaining lifeboats were being prepared, but time was running out. Titanic's bow was now much lower. The deck was steepening. Passengers who remained aboard could finally see the terrible truth. This was no longer a precaution. Titanic was sinking. One by one, the last lifeboats were lowered into the darkness. But hundreds of people were still on the ship. There was no longer enough room for everyone. The ocean climbed higher across Titanic's forward decks. The lights still burned, but the ship was becoming increasingly unstable. Passengers gathered on the higher parts of the deck. Some held on to family members. Others searched for a safe place to stand. The enormous liner was slowly losing its battle with the Atlantic. Then, the ship's stern began rising higher above the water. Titanic's angle became steeper. The weight of the ship placed enormous stress on its structure. The bow disappeared farther beneath the Atlantic. The stern rose dramatically into the night sky. Then, Titanic broke apart. The two major sections separated. The bow plunged beneath the ocean. The stern remained above the water for a short time longer. Then it too began its final descent. At approximately 2:20 a.m. on April 15, 1912, Titanic disappeared beneath the Atlantic. The lights went out. The enormous ship was gone. For a moment, there was only darkness and the sound of the freezing ocean. Hundreds of people remained in the water. The lifeboats drifted nearby, but the disaster was not yet over. The survivors waited in the darkness. They had watched the world's most famous ocean liner disappear beneath the Atlantic. Hours earlier, Titanic had been filled with music, conversation, and bright electric lights. Now, there was only the cold ocean, but in the distance, a rescue ship was coming. The Carpathia was on its way. The lifeboats drifted across the freezing Atlantic. Survivors waited in the darkness. Then, a light appeared on the horizon. It was the rescue ship Carpathia. The ship had raced through dangerous waters after receiving Titanic's distress calls. As it approached, hope finally returned. One by one, survivors were brought aboard. The nightmare was beginning to end, but hundreds of people were still missing. By morning, the scale of the disaster was clear. Titanic was gone. More than 1,500 people had died. Only about 700 survivors were rescued. The world was left with one question: how could such a massive ship disappear in a single night? News of the disaster spread around the world. Families desperately searched for news of loved ones. Soon, serious questions followed. Why weren't there enough lifeboats? Why was Titanic traveling so fast through an area with ice? Investigations began on both sides of the Atlantic. Over the years, Titanic's story became surrounded by myths. Some stories were exaggerated, others became mixed with fiction. Even the famous unsinkable legend is more complicated than people often believe. But the real story is already extraordinary. Titanic changed maritime safety forever. Lifeboat requirements were strengthened. Wireless communication became more important, and the International Ice Patrol was established to monitor dangerous ice. More than a century later, Titanic still lies beneath the Atlantic. Its story remains a symbol of ambition. It changed the future of ocean travel.